Welcome back to Crossroad, your wide open moto podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nichols, and this week we're going to recap the WSX Round 5 final round out in South Africa. And, this brings a close to the 2025 season. This will also be our last show, of the year as well. And then a few weeks we'll return for our preview show right before Anaheim 1 kicks off. But first and foremost, let's talk about, this WSX track as we always do. Pretty good format, had a little bit of a change. I had a right hand corner as well, which is good, a little bit of difference there. The track layout, it looked good, had, your typical rhythms that were built into it, but the soil was really the story. This track was really, really dry, right out of the gate. I don't believe I really saw him put water on it, during the entire, night show. But really dry. It broke down quite a bit. It got really loose out there. But in the end, it ended up making for some pretty decent racing. Jumping into the 250 class, Max Anstey had a pretty commanding lead heading into the night. He only needed seventh or better in that first race to just clinch it. Cody Schock was sitting in second place in the overall standings, and then Shane McElrath was sitting in third. And it was a pretty decent gap. I want to say it was about 600 points or so for Cody Schock. But heading into the night, I mean, it was really Shane McElrath start to finish. He ends up sweeping all three rounds. All three races. Max Anstey was right behind him as well, and he really just had nothing for him. It was a track that was really tough to kind of make up some ground with the top guys. Savatgy looked great, all night long. His starts were dialed. Very, made very little amount of mistakes. Anstey's starts weren't really, as great as what we have seen, but nevertheless, I mean, he still had the speed to work his way up through the pack, but he was only able to salvage, a second place. So shout out to Shane McElrath, really stepping up, putting a strong performance in, getting his first win of the year as well. So it's good to see that number one plate up on top. And yeah, I mean, great job for Shane McElrath closing out the season. Cody Schock, it was another disappointing night. I've talked about all season long. He just has not been able to put three races together, and tonight was really no different. He ends up losing second overall in the championship to Shane McElrath. Um, and Cody Schock, I mean, he was really kind of invisible all night long. I don't believe he got on the box all night. Really just tough ending to the series for Cody Schock. It's back to the drawing board, I think. And then as he heads into, Supercross season, which I think he's racing East Coast. So he's still got some time, but I mean, he's really got to find some speed and consistency. I thought this was going to be a good series for him to really step up and shine and run with the top guys of this class, and he honestly never really did. Enzo Lopes was even better than him throughout most of the season. So kind of a disappointing WSX for Cody Schock, and I mean we'll see what he brings to the table heading into 2026. Now, heading into the 450 class, this we talked about it, last week's show. It was a three-man race between Anderson, Savatgy, and Craig. Savatgy and Anderson were both tied with the points, and Craig was only 1 point behind the two. Starting off with Craig, I think the pressure got to him. He ended up going down early in the first race. He ended up going down again in the second race. And in the third race, he actually had, decent start, was in second, but by the end of that third race, Savatgy and Anderson really checked out from Craig. And yeah, honestly, it just seemed like, Craig just wasn't ready for the pressure that came with winning this title. And it showed he made a lot of mistakes, and, he ended up finishing third in the overall title. Going to the top two, it was great racing all night long, and especially when we get to race three. But Anderson really kind of had the best of Savatgy, heading into race one and race two. Ended up winning both of those races, but Savatgy did what he needed to do and finished second in both of those races to make sure that heading into the third race, it was a winner take all. Savatgy did have to come through the pack in the second race. I think he was about sixth or seventh, and worked his way all the way up to second. And he was riding off the rails. You could tell that he was totally letting it hang out and doing everything that he could to get up to that second place to make that third race matter. Anderson, I mean, this kind of seemed like it was a pretty good track for him. I mean, it was dry, it was loose. That's usually where we see him, do fairly well. In previous years, and he looked pretty consistent out there. His starts were good. He didn't make too many mistakes. In that first race, he did get pushed off the track by Joey Savatgy, but really didn't lose very much time as he came back on. So, yeah, Anderson looked pretty solid all night long, and as well as Joey Savatgy. I mean, I believe he was number one in qualifying and in Super Pole. So Savatgy had the speed all night long. But talk about this third race, man. This, to me, this had to be the best race of the year, at least what I can remember. It was between Joey Savatgy and Anderson. Savatgy took off; he had the whole shot, and he led for, I would say, at least half of the race. And then after that, him and Anderson were just going back and forth, multiple block passes, but it was the kind of block pass that, no one really had the risk of, falling down or being sent over the berm, which I'm surprised, I would have thought that maybe it would have came to that. But there had to be 4 or 5 different lead changes, a few different rhythms that they were doing. The whoops played a big factor as well. But I mean, it was just those two, up at the front, and they were just battling back and forth. But in the end, it ends up being Anderson, ends up squeezing it out. Joey Savatgy had an opportunity heading into the second to last corner, but he clipped the landing, and that was kind of it. But I mean, like I said, this had to be maybe the best race of the year, including all of 2026 Supercross, at least from what I remember. These guys were racing hard. They're letting it hang out. The track played a factor as well. They both made mistakes, but it was just solely because they were just pushing the limits. And, really great racing between the two of them. I think, after race interviews, I can't imagine either one of them is going to have anything bad to say about how the other one was riding. It was just tough racing, but, the passes were hard, but in my opinion, they were also clean at the same time. And yeah, I mean, it was a great finale to this WSX season. Heading into it, we weren't really sure what we were going to get, right? This is the most rounds that they've had. The first round really started off on a bad foot, looking at the venue. It looked like, a fair race. But we had some big storylines going into it. We had, Hayden Deegan, he did his 450 debut at the first round. Um, then he ended up leaving. Ken Roxon, he raced the first 3 rounds and had a pretty commanding points lead, but didn't finish out the last two. So that was kind of a big factor there. And then heading into, I believe it was round two, Eli Tomac, he made his KTM debut and he ended up winning. So he looked really great. So that was another big storyline heading into it. And then looking back at race number three, we had Deegan, Roxon, and Tomac all battle it out as well, which, Deegan ended up beating Tomac in the few in a race. Same thing with Christian Craig. We saw him kind of catch some fire. Kenny stayed consistent, but in that race three, Eli didn't look as good. So that was another storyline, after that is all right. Well, maybe Tomac's not as comfortable on this bike as what we thought. So round three was great, and then heading into round four, this was where it was really going to be interesting how this title was going to shake up because all those big names are going to be out, but those three guys really made it interesting. Anderson, clawed his way back into this title, which to me, knowing Roxon, Eli, weren't racing the full series anyways, I thought Anderson should be a pretty good shoe into winning this title, but he had some bad races. Savatgy stayed consistent for the most part, but Anderson got the first race win, overall win, of his season at that race four, and that really kind of tightened the points heading into this round five. And round five, I mean, it was just overall it was a great show, great racing. I'm excited to see what WSX heading into next year is going to look like. But to me, it's racing, right? It's off season races. We have the big names that we're going to see: Ken Roxon, Joey Savatgy, Christian Craig. They're going to be lined up at Anaheim one. I would think so. So we had those big names that we see over here go and compete over there, and battle each other out. So overall, it was really great. Exciting races. It had a rocky start, but at the end of this series, it ended up turning out to be fairly entertaining. Um, but that's it. Really quick show. Just recapping this final round, the season overall. But that'll be it for us. We'll be back in January, most likely the week before Anaheim. Get all the boys back in here. We'll do our Supercross preview show. Who we think is going to be the title favorites, who's going to surprise us, who we think maybe is going to take that step back. I mean, there's a lot of changes heading into the 2026 season. You got Eli Tomac on the new KTM, Chase Sexton. We haven't seen him on that new bike yet. Um, we've already seen Anderson on the Suzuki. We've seen the Lawrence brothers, we've seen Malcolm, shred out in Paris, and we really just haven't seen Sexton. But if you look at these clips on Instagram, I mean, he looks pretty comfy on that Kawasaki. Of course, Jorge Prado, he's back on KTM, so that's going to be interesting to see, how he's going to ride going back to, a manufacturer that he's at least familiar with. Um, so I mean, man, there's a lot of headlines heading into this 2026 season. Even the 250 class, unfortunately, Joe Shimoda's going to be out. We now know that Deegan will be racing West Coast, so he'll be at A1 on his 250, and then he'll make his 450 debut heading into outdoors. And who knows if he gets a pretty good lead on this 250 West Coast title, maybe we do see him race 450 on a couple rounds, maybe like a Daytona or something, just to kind of get some more laps in. But all in all, it's been a great year. Thank you from Crossroad for giving us the follow, listening to us week in and week out. Um, we look forward to 2026. We're going to bring that fire. And yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for us to get started next year. But thanks again, and we'll see you next year. See ya.